VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadies.
Denver dispensaries are showing an 80% fail rate in random mold tests. We're going to talk about a story that just doesn't quite smell right. And good news about cannabis users who are also heavy drinkers. We have these stories and a few other things to share with you today. Welcome, everybody. Glad you made it for another episode of VoteProPot-Cast. I want to start with this Denver dispensaries issue because that one kind of is troubling.
The Denver Department of Public Health and Environment is on the move. They issued a statement to all the dispensaries in Denver saying that they are going to have random testing. They're sending their agents out to purchase products, and they're going to take them back and test them for mold and yeast in August of last year.
Okay.
So then from September 9th to September 11th, they went out and they took purchases from 20 different dispensaries. Their purpose is to evaluate the contaminants that are in the product that are on the shelves. Now, when cannabis gets sold wholesale, it's tested when it's grown, it's tested after it's processed. So when it leaves the wholesaler, it's okay. But when it's sitting on the shelves, they think mold can develop, and that's the purpose for this study. So they went to 25 different dispensaries, and they found that 20 of them had one or more holds or quarantine orders that were issued. Now they test a lot of products, and I'm not saying that all the weed at these dispensaries are moldy. It's just certain ones, and some of them are prepackaged, so they're not at the processors. So they really don't even put their hands on the actual flowers. So you really can't blame the dispensaries. Right. It's a new industry, and we really don't know. We're going to be working on all the challenges as time goes on. And I think this is one of them. What happens? We don't know what happens to all this flour after it's been sitting in a container on a shelf under, I don't know how hot or cold it is in the storage rooms. So we're learning all this. And the industry has come back and said that, the science they're using for these testing is a little iffy. And at what point because like with tobacco and even with cannabis to a certain extent, a certain amount of
is okay.
I don't want to say contaminants, but certain elements that aren't naturally there is okay.
Well, there is what they refer to as the threshold of filth in any processed
like hot
foods.
Dogs.
Right.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
any processed food.
Right.
So what they're saying now is the commission says that they're not going to retest anything, but the companies have the right to retest it on their own if they want. Because now they're saying, well, if a bunch of flour is not good, if I process it and sort of clean it, can I make extracts out of it? So that's being decided on a case-by-case process, which makes sense.
I like
to see when the government makes sense on what they're doing.
I think that makes entire sense. I mean, sure. It's there is a regulatory state, and it's there for a reason. And when there wasn't any, quality of the things, who knows what you were going to get? So that's a legitimate, I think, function of mostly municipal or statewide government, because that's who controls this sort of thing. But, I mean, if you're going to go down the supply chain, like you say, the growers get tested, the wholesalers, the processors get tested. But, now it's important to focus on what's going on once it hits the retail level.
Well, this might be an opportunity for ancillary business, well, specifically businesses that produce packaging for cannabis. Maybe they need to get on board and see, what's the issue? And again, if they can correct it, I would say they could profit from that greatly.
I would think so.
Now, since they've been tracking this, and since 2017, the number of write-ups that they've had concerning mold on cannabis has gone up 10%. But then again, they weren't testing before 2017 for mold.
Right.
Yep. So I don't know. I think that it's an issue that the industry, I think, is going to take care of on its own. I don't think they're going to have time to write up regulations before the industry, nips. Pardon the pun, but nips this in the bud.
Jay, I want to hear this story. Typically VoteProPot-Cast does not deal with issues relating to substances that one puts up one's nose. But this one might be an exception.
I got this from Vice. Becky Ferreira. A man who tried to sneak a bag of cannabis into prison in his nose 18 years ago has finally had the dried up weed removed from his nasal cavity, according to a new case report published in the British medical journal Case Reports. So it is the first report.
So this guy, I mean, he did. Didn't he remember that he put a bag of weed up his nose? He forgot about it? Or what?
Here's the deal. He stuck this little, his girlfriend, I guess, came to see him, and she snuck him a little teeny balloon with a little teeny bit of weed in it, and he put it in his nose, which worked. He got by the guards. But then when he went to fish it out in his cell or whatever, he couldn't get it out, and he felt it go up there, so he's like, fuck, So he assumed he swallowed it, okay? So it says here, the patient, who is now 48 years old, slipped a package into his right nostril and was able to hide it from the prison guards this way. But when he tried to retrieve it, he accidentally lodged the pot deeper into his nasal cavity and assumed that he had unknowingly swallowed it at some point. Oh, I'm gagging. It's like, as it turns out, the nose weed never quite made it to the man's throat, and instead, it developed into a gray calcified lesion measuring 19 by 11 millimeters. It's called a rhinolith. They're uncommon, but what happens is it's basically a nose nugget. It's basically a
nose
booger.
stone. Yeah,
it's a booger. Yeah. But they're known
booger.
They're known to form around blood clots or foreign objects, and can enter the nasal cavity. Things like beads and pieces of cotton or plant matter. So that's what's happened to this guy. So this guy was having all kinds of issues with sinus infection. He didn't know it was in there. He was having like all these problems and shit. So the patient with the marijuana based rhinolith or nose nugget said that he had a history of nasal obstruction and frequent sinus infections. Oh, God, this is so gross. But
man, how big was this guy's nose? And how much weed was it?
But the source of those symptoms wasn't noticed until he sought treatment for a painful headache. They did a CT scan of his brain, and it revealed a rubber capsule containing degenerate vegetable plant matter. Ugh. So,
what could that be?
Yeah, well, so they removed
smuggling some spinach in there.
So anyway, this guy is feeling much better. So
I'm glad.
I guess the moral of the story is don't try to smuggle weed in a balloon up your nose in prison, right?
Everything goes up his nose. I can't believe it, Doctor.
Oh, God.
Did he end up smoking it?
It's still good.
Hey, be a nice little bong hit, right? God,
really? Got all fell that for how much could it have been? I mean, how big was this
it was
guy's
a little
nose?
teeny balloon full, just big enough to get it in your nostril.
Was that worth it? I mean, that's like
shit,
3 hits and
should I
30
spill
years
that
later
much when I roll a joint?
That's right.
Well, lessons learned.
This week is Halloween, and my favorite costume of the year was Rihanna was dressed up as Mary Jane. I posted it on our Facebook page, so check it out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw that.
She's like the queen of ganja.
Yeah, she's beautiful too, by the way.
Really hadn't noticed.
And also speaking this week, I don't know if anyone knows this, but we're from the Washington area, and I don't know if anyone watched this week, but there was a baseball game on, and you guys want to tell us about that?
There was a series of them, in fact, and why don't you tell us what
7
happened
games
about that
to be exact?
7 of them.
Well, my favorite highlight of the whole series, of the World Series, was a local in D.C., a local news reporter. He was at a watch game when the game was being played in Texas. So all the fans showed up at the stadium to watch, and this guy's doing a live broadcast, and all of a sudden this huge cloud of smoke just crosses his face, and he looks around and goes, "Is that weed?" And they go, "Oh, back to the studio."
Well, that's the thing about D.C. now. It's obviously legal down there.
It's legal.
You smell it everywhere. And I mean, I was in a club recently, a couple weeks ago.
Yep, there
and
it is.
I walked out, and they were just like huffing a joint right there. As us old guys, we got to adjust to that. That's still like,
I could adjust to that.
It's just
I got
weird.
no problem
It's just
with
weird.
that. So on a more serious note, Andrew, it's the lobbying priorities for large cannabis companies is not social justice as you might think, but business.
Yeah, as it turns out, Acreage, Curaleaf, Surterra, which is now Parallel, all the biggest companies, now they spend money advocating and hiring lobbyists to support legislation and regulations that's going to help their industry. Obviously, all businesses do that. But it turns out all these companies are really just concentrating on legislation that's going to help their business in specifically the Banking Act. So they're all going after the Banking Act. Which I understand, but they're sort of forgetting the people sitting in jail and a lot of the other social issues. They're just getting it off Schedule 1. Now, there is a company called Forefront Ventures. It's a newcomer into the federal lobbying scene. Now, they're spending money to support other issues other than just the banking. So I don't know. Some people are saying, the big businesses, they're forgetting, the people, the small people, But I kind of understand why they're doing it.
Sure.
Priorities.
And I'm sure they have, and in the past, a lot of people in this industry have always advocated for reform. So I don't know. What do you think, guys?
I think, there's the old saying, the business of America is business. And, certainly the business of companies is business. So they're going to do what, they're going to solve the most pressing problems first.
You have to set priorities, right?
Don't you think? I mean, the most pressing problem is
staying in business.
Yeah, being able to move the money.
Right.
So that's.
I don't think it means necessarily I don't think it means necessarily they're not socially conscious. I think they are, and they will be, and that will be a focus later. But first things first, they gotta turn the red into black. They got to make money.
Well, some people say first things first, let's get it off Schedule 1. And if you did that, banking wouldn't be an issue.
True. That's right.
I kind of get what they're doing. But, and also I think a lot of these big companies probably are doing some advocating or at least helping and supporting organizations like us that are advocating for social justice.
You would hope, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe they just need to come out and just, be more transparent of what they're doing and say, hey, we do. Yeah, we're really into this banking thing, but we're not forgetting about the small guy. Right. If they make donations to Vote Pro Pot, we'll make sure we spread the word.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you have some budget,
buy a mug for God's sakes.
We've got our cups in our hands. So I'm looking at this article by Observer.com, and that's just a commentary site on all kinds of issues. This one says why the cannabis industry has to remember its roots as it goes mainstream. And I think the point of this is not so much aimed towards, it's aimed towards the industry. So at that level, but I think it's not a question. This is not so much issuing the priorities, but just the underlying kind of understanding that it really is, at the end of the day, about, we're all fighting for social justice, and I think social justice is a term that has been co-opted, I think, a little unfairly by the left, and without getting too fine a point on that, we talk about social justice as having a right to this and that, a right to health care, and a right to housing, and all of these rights that what we really want to have the right to is to be left alone. That's what social justice. The kind of social justice I think is on the minds of our founders. Just leave people alone to do what they want to do, long as we're not impinging on anybody else's rights.
Right.
And the business is, I think, just the natural outgrowth of free people, interacting. It's, individual liberty and voluntary exchange, and that's really what capitalism's all about, being left alone. Now, we talk about the mold issue and the legitimate role for the government. I think, this whole, this is what's attracted to me to this whole issue is cannabis has become kind of a microcosm for a lot of the philosophy of the issues that underlie the issues that we face today. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. One of the things I believe is that, everyone's talking about this new industry, And it is a new industry. We're setting up, grow operations, processors, and, taxing and all this. But the market, the customers, they're not new. They've been established for years, and they have likes and dislikes and opinions.
Right, and choices.
And choice. Yeah, and they've made their choices.
Yeah.
And they're going to continue to make choices that can affect all these new companies. Now, we did see a company in Maryland who got aggressive trying to stop the state legislature from allowing home grows in the state of Maryland, and the customers or their patients, I mean, they literally started picketing in front of their company.
Oh, yeah.
And they drew back so fast they left a vapor trail.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
You're nothing but a blur. This opinion piece from The Observer is written by a guy named Chris Rebentish. I'm just going to read this little anecdote from it because it's interesting. Before building one of Nevada's preeminent cannabis brands, which received Southern Nevada's first license to open a cultivation facility, I was arrested for growing marijuana in my home. 4 years ago, state police raided my house and escorted me out in handcuffs. That night, as my wife called me in jail asking what I was going to do next, I told her flat out, quote, I'm just getting started. We're going to fight this thing until the end. He's fighting for business, but he's also fighting for the right to be left alone to conduct his business.
For freedom.
For freedom. Right.
That's the point.
Listen to the song at the end of the episode to understand that joke.
So I think it's all of a piece, as I say. It's all the business being able to bank without fear, and individuals having the right to smoke some weed if they want to without fear. It's all part of the same social justice package.
But then also we need to keep an eye on these companies and make sure they're not behaving badly. Which brings me up to an issue that something happened on our social network, on one of our social networking sites. Richard from Pasadena, Maryland, he wrote in and said how he bought 5/8 from a dispensary in Maryland from their brand, their own brand, and had it delivered. And after it was delivered, he weighed them all out, and they all were under 3 grams, and some of them almost a gram shy.
Wow.
Now, he called the dispensaries, and they more or less said, well, sorry, that's the nature of just doing business. Sorry, 'cause I kind of understand you. I mean, when you're in business, someone calls and complains, you don't know if it's legitimate or they're bullshit just trying to get over on you. Sure. But in this case, especially the marijuana in this industry, I think you really have to be, especially it's turning out that the competition is getting pretty stiff in this industry, and I think you really have to nurture and savor your customers, or your patients, as you should say.
Well,
yeah. So what I did, I went by the same dispensary and picked up 2/8 and went home. Now I have a pastry scale which only measures 2 grams, doesn't get 2, and I put it on there, and they all registered 2 grams. So according to my scale, they're under 3. I'm not going to mention the name of it because I don't know if my scale is accurate enough. And also that's pretty serious before you start, accusing people of doing something like this. But on their side, I believe one of the members of the board of this company got online and said, I'm sorry to hear about this. And I talked to the dispensary manager, and I don't think he handled it right. I apologize. And he handled it great. Come by, we'll give you $1.08 and yada, yada, yada.
Well, I wonder, Andrew, do you know, if you when you package cannabis, does it dry out? Does it lose some weight naturally after being weighed and packaged? I
don't know. I don't know if 3.5 grams will lose 1 gram of moisture.
That's huge.
That seems like a lot.
Too much.
But I really don't believe. I'm familiar with this company, and I really don't believe that everyone I know there. They don't seem like the kind of people that would purposely start shorting.
Gotcha.
I believe it might be an issue. Now, the one guy had it delivered. Someone on the thread said, man, maybe the delivery guy had sticky fingers. Wait, I don't know.
Yeah, well, these are sealed packaging, though, right? I mean, there's no way to...
Yeah, they are. But I guess if you I mean, nothing's, you can counterfeit anything.
Well, like you pointed out, you go to the deli and they measure meat right there on the, why don't they do that when they pull these packages out?
This is the old story of the deli guy with his thumb on the scale.
Exactly.
Why
don't they drop
Some dispensaries do.
Do they?
Some dispensaries do that.
But I mean,
But I don't know. I'm not really sure if this is a problem.
Yeah.
But so what I'm asking for, and I think we might do some reach out on social networking. I like for a bunch of people, when you buy from a dispensary, if you have an accurate scale, before you use any of it, take it home and weigh it.
Yeah, check it out.
And
because
document it on your cell phone.
Yeah.
Document it. Yeah, document it on your cell phone and just make comments. Because I don't know. I don't want to believe this is an issue, but it'd be interesting to find out. And it'd also be interesting to find out that, no, it's not an issue.
Right.
I think the industry would like that to be out there, because I really believe I don't think all these people
would
they're
purposely,
really sharp people in this industry.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Yeah, would purposely do this. I think there might be another answer.
Yeah.
It'd
be interesting to see how they respond. Well, you said they responded, but it'd be interesting to see what their kind of answer is for why this would maybe happen. If there's a legitimate reason having to do with packaging or something, I don't know.
Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start tracking by brand, not really by dispensary.
That's a good idea.
I think it's going to be right, because that's really what it's about. Although some dispensaries do package their own brand,
right?
And this one is one of them. A lot of them do. So we'll see. We'll see, because I could see that happening. That's sort of a dispensary, one guy in there weighing it out. Let's spread this out a little bit. And also, when you're putting in, buds,
right? You're not going to break up a bud. Yeah, right.
Well, but you kind of have to.
You're going to have to get it to the right weight. Yeah.
Right.
But maybe they're not.
What I'd like to see if they just sell, okay, this is weed. It costs so much per quarter, or so much per ounce, and this is about an eighth, but you're paying by volume.
Right.
So it's going to be, if it's a $50 eighth, it might be a little over, so it might be $55. Hey, this one's $47 because it's not quite.
Like when you go to the deli, right, and you buy cheese or meat.
Exactly the same way. And plus, I just want a whole buzz. Don't break it up or give me shit. Just give me 10 buds, whatever that weighs.
If it's $52 instead of $50, that's fine. Yeah.
I agree.
So anyway, so out there, weigh it and comment, please. Let's
good idea.
Let's find out what's going on here.
So, guys, there's a study out that's real interesting to me. I thought of you, Phil. It says here, heavy alcohol drinkers who also smoke cannabis may slash their odds of getting killer liver disease, such as cirrhosis, by up to 55%. Of course, I'm kidding about that. Phil's not a big drinker. Well,
that's significant.
No, 55%. Yeah. And so this guy did a study. His name is, and bear with me here, there's like 300 vowels in this guy's name. Dr. Adeyinka Charles Adejuma of North Shore Medical Center in Massachusetts. So what they did...
Sounds Nigerian.
Yeah, possibly.
Names are like that.
It's a mouthful. They did a study of 320,000 people. So this is a huge sampling. 320,000 people they studied who had a history of alcohol abuse. 90% of them had never smoked cannabis. That's interesting.
Wow.
Around
control group.
Yeah, around 8% smoked it now and again, and 2% were dependent on it. Well, I'm not sure how to take that, but meaning they felt withdrawal if they were not. The quote here is taking the drug, unquote. But you see where they're getting at.
Right.
Both dependent and non-dependent smokers had a 45% lower risk of getting alcoholic steatosis or fatty liver disease, which is cirrhosis and other diseases. That's a huge percentage, guys. I mean, you're talking about half or more than half. They had a 55% lower chance of developing cirrhosis, which is scarring of the liver, which can and will lead to liver failure. And they had a 38% lower odds of hepatocellular carcinoma, which is a form of liver cancer, right? They wrote in the journal Liver International, quote, while cannabis has demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties, its combined use with alcohol in the development of liver disease remains unclear. It's not clear, based on these preliminary studies, which part of the cannabis plant may be protective. So these are some pretty staggering numbers. I mean, 45%. And this is out of a huge sampling, a total of 320,000 people. So
wow.
First thing, has it maybe occurred to them it's not part of the plant, but the whole
well, that
plant
could be too.
might be.
And that's part of what they need to
The entourage effect.
If you pull anything out of this story from me, if this doesn't solidify, the need for much more aggressive clinical research on the potential, of cannabis as a medicine, then what does? I mean, these are staggering numbers, 45 to 55%. It's not like 1% or 2% or margin of error. It's a huge chunk of these people who do not suffer, apparently, because they use cannabis.
Well, look at what we've talked about on this show. We're talking about how the use of cannabis can help people who are using alcohol. We've talked about the use of cannabis to people who are addicted to opiates. Yeah. We talked even about people who smoke cigarettes and cannabis, which was an interesting how people who didn't smoke cigarettes and smoked cannabis had larger lung capacity than people who didn't smoke at all.
Right, exactly. The opposite of what you would think.
We're not touting that there's any solid, maybe for some of it, proof, but it's still, like Jay says, this warrants investigation.
Right.
Those of you who listen regularly may know we were on this show that Jimmy Young and Kurt Dalton do called the Weed Talk Live. Now, Jimmy Young started the Pro Cannabis Media, which is a very cool website. Check it out. And he's basically creating a network of cannabis news shows. He's going to have correspondents from all over the country, different areas, doing stories related to cannabis in their area. So it's a very huge undertaking that Jimmy's taking on. He's got a podcast called In the Weeds, which is great. You should check it out. He interviews some of the biggest people in the industry. And we were fortunate enough to be on his and Kurt's show last week, I guess it was. It was a lot of fun. We're going to have Jimmy on a show real soon, possibly next week. So we look forward to that.
Cool.
Yeah, we look forward to that. We want to thank Jimmy Young and Kurt Dalton Kurt Dalton, by the way, is a former CEO of Canopy Growth. And he and Jimmy like I said, this live show. So keep your ears open for that. And thanks, Jimmy and Kurt, for having us on. And we look forward to having you guys on the show here in the next couple weeks.
And we've got mugs.
Mugs!
VoteProPot-Cast mugs. They look great.
They do.
A 12-ounce mug with our VoteProPot-Cast logo emblazoned on it. Makes the perfect Christmas gift. So go online to VoteProPot.com and buy a mug, help the cause, and, check off some people from your list.
Aunt Edith and Grandma would love one to add to their collection of porcelain.
My Aunt Edith and my grandma both love theirs.
Imagine how much fun that would be to have one at Thanksgiving dinner.
Cup of coffee? If you're enjoying the show, we sure would love you to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever platform you're on. Give us a 5-star rating. It sure would help.
Send us an email at podcast@votepropot.com.
And check us out on social media. Just go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter and do a search for Vote Pro Pot.
Lock me up, find me good, label me a menace to your quiet neighborhood. I don't grow no plants, the state says I can't. That's not freedom, that's the point. Smoke a bowl, I roll a joint, do what I want, if I hurt nobody, that's the point. And if I wanna get high, They don't listen to the people, but they decide what's best for you and me. Smoke a bowl or roll a joint. Do what you want if it hurts nobody. That's the point. So let's get high, yeah, you and I. It's called freedom, freedom, freedom. It's called freedom, freedom, freedom. Oh yeah. That's the point.